From these incredible feats of engineering, like landing a high-tech jet on a moving carrier or pushing towards hypersonic flight,
Hmm.
to the stuff that's just completely unexpected, like
Wow.
a helicopter suddenly buzzing over your neighborhood or, well, an airstrike hitting terrifyingly close to an airport runway.
Right, with a passenger plane right there on the taxiway.
Yeah.
It's really something.
It really is. The world of aviation and aerospace, it's this amazing, sometimes jarring mix, isn't it? Peak human tech right alongside, well, the messy reality of global events and even local oddities.
Absolutely. It's that complex picture we're diving into today.
Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. It is great to have you join us. If you're enjoying these deep dives, maybe take a moment to hit that thumbs up, share it with someone, or subscribe. It genuinely helps us keep doing this.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. So today we've got quite a stack of sources you've shared. We're looking at recent developments across the board in aviation and aerospace.
Exactly. Everything from the big manufacturers, the Airbuses and Boeings, major military shifts, incidents impacting travel safety, and yeah, even some pretty unusual sightings people have reported.
And our mission, like always in these deep dives, is to sift through all this material. We dig out the most important bits, the key insights, to help you get up to speed quickly.
Okay, let's get into it then. We can start on the commercial side, maybe look at the airlines, the planes you fly on. Airbus features pretty prominently in the sources. What's the story there?
Well, the picture that emerges is a company that's really bounced back pretty strongly from the pandemic slump. And now they seem intensely focused on what's next, especially sustainability.
Okay, so recovery first. They're based in Toulouse, France, right? How's that recovery looking in, practical terms?
It looks solid. One source highlights a key number: 288 commercial aircraft delivered in just the first half of 2023. Yeah, and that's pointed out as a really major increase. It underscores two things, really. One, the aerospace industry is definitely recovering. And two, there's this, well, undeniable global demand for air travel again. Airlines need planes.
You definitely feel that at the airport things are packed. Okay, so they're meeting that demand. But what about the big challenge, sustainability? How's Airbus tackling that based on the material?
That seems to be a huge priority. They've set this pretty ambitious goal: net zero emissions by 2050.
Net zero by 2050 for aviation. That sounds incredibly tough. How are they even starting?
Well, a key thing mentioned is their work on hydrogen as a fuel. They're not just, talking about it. They're actively moving towards testing.
Hydrogen fuel. Interesting.
Yeah, the sources suggest they're aiming for first test flights using hydrogen by 2025. It's framed as potentially groundbreaking.
Groundbreaking compared to, say, sustainable aviation fuels, the SAFs we hear about.
Right. So SAFs are important, definitely. They can be used often in current engines, drop-in fuels basically, and cut emissions significantly, maybe up to 80%. But they still involve combustion, still produce CO2 at the end of the day.
Okay.
Hydrogen, though, when you burn it, the main byproduct is just water vapor. So a hydrogen plane offers a path to potentially zero direct carbon emissions in flight.
Zero direct emissions.
Exactly. Now, the challenge is huge. You need totally different engines, different fuel tanks on the plane, massive changes to airport infrastructure to handle hydrogen, some much bigger technological leap, which is why these initial test flights are such a big deal.
Gotcha. So Airbus is juggling, basically, meeting current demand with record deliveries, which, let's face it, has an immediate environmental cost, while also pouring resources into this revolutionary hydrogen tech that could change everything decades down the line. It's quite the balancing act.
It really is.
Yeah.
And their path, their success or failure on both fronts, it directly affects airlines, the economy, and ultimately you, the traveler, thinking about ticket prices, where you can fly, and, the environmental footprint of your journey.
Okay, let's shift gears completely now, moving from the commercial giants over to the military side of aerospace and defense. Some really major strategic changes are happening there, particularly, it seems, with Boeing.
Yes, the sources definitely detail a significant pivot for Boeing's defense arm. The big headline is they're planning to end production of the FA-18 Super Hornet.
Wow, the Super Hornet. That feels like it's been the workhorse for the U.S. Navy for ages. When are they planning to stop?
The plan is 2025. There's a little asterisk, though. If an international customer puts in a new order, they might extend production to 2027.
Yeah.
But the direction is clear.
Wind it down.
And the reason. Why now?
It's framed as strategic. Boeing is shifting its resources, think money, engineers, factory space, towards future military aircraft programs. They're looking past the Super Hornet to what comes next. And they're putting serious cash behind that shift.
Oh, yeah. a substantial amount. The sources mention over $1 billion invested.
$1 billion.
Yep. That includes building 3 new facilities in St. Louis, which is ironically where the Super Hornet is built now, plus a new advanced composite center in Arizona, and a dedicated new factory for the MQ-25 Stingray drone.
Okay, so it's that classic defense move, right? Phase out a successful platform to free up capacity for the next big thing. What else are they focusing on with this shift?
Well, definitely increasing production of things like that MQ-25 Stingray, the uncrewed aerial refueler. Unmanned systems are clearly a huge focus, and of course they'll keep supporting the existing Super Hornets and the Growler electronic warfare versions out there with upgrades and maintenance. Those planes aren't disappearing from the sky anytime soon.
Right, they need support. Now, speaking of future aircraft, the sources also mention the U.S. Next Generation Air Dominance Program, NGAD.
Yes, there's a mention in one source referencing former President Trump having announced at one point that Boeing would build a future fighter under NGAD, which he apparently called the F-47.
The S-47.
Yeah. And the same source notes that the NGAD program itself was reportedly paused under the Biden administration.
It just highlights how these huge long-term defense plans can shift with political changes, doesn't it?
It certainly seems that way sometimes.
Okay, beyond the U.S. shifts, the sources point to a really interesting development involving China's military exports.
That's right. The news about Pakistan acquiring China's J-35 stealth fighter. Sources confirm Pakistan is buying the J-35A variant. It's described as a 5th-generation stealth jet.
Okay, 5th-generation stealth. Can you quickly unpack what that generally means in this context?
Sure. So 5th gen typically means it's got that low observable, stealthy design to evade radar. Plus, really advanced sensors and sensor fusion, basically combining data from everywhere into one clear picture for the pilot. And advanced networking to share data fast. It's not just about being fast or nimble. It's about information and surviving in dangerous airspace.
Got it. So Pakistan's getting a pretty advanced capability. Any word on when they expect delivery?
The timeline mentioned is potentially quite soon, maybe early 2026 or possibly late 2026, early 2027.
That seems quick for such a complex system. What's the bigger picture significance here?
Well, it's pretty significant. The sources point out this could make Pakistan the very first country outside China to operate a squadron of J-35s.
First export customer.
Exactly. And it marks the first confirmed export sale of what's considered China's most advanced military aircraft. And interestingly, one source even floats the possibility of maybe a 50% discount being involved.
50% off a stealth fighter. That would definitely make waves in the global arms market.
Absolutely. It suggests China might be getting very aggressive in competing for defense contracts.
So if you pull back these different threads, Boeing stopping the Super Hornet, investing in future tech like drones, the NGAD program status, and Pakistan buying China's top fighter, possibly at a steep discount, what kind of picture does that paint globally?
It paints a picture of, an accelerating global competition, technologically and strategically. Boeing's moves show the U.S. focus shifting towards unmanned systems and next-gen network platforms. Pakistan getting the J-35 boosts their capabilities massively, yes, but it also really establishes China as a serious global player, offering top-tier military tech, challenging the traditional dominance of the U.S., Russia, and European suppliers. It impacts regional power balances, international relations, the whole defense industry, really.
Okay, moving from those high-level strategic shifts, let's bring it down to ground level or maybe runway level.
Yeah.
How aviation intersects directly with real-world geopolitics and safety concerns. The sources had some pretty stark examples.
Yes, this brings us to some very current and, frankly, quite tense situations. The sources mentioned developments around airports in Beirut, Lebanon.
Right, there were a couple of different things mentioned about Beirut airports, weren't there? Kind of contrasting situations.
Exactly. On one hand, there's a report dated June 2025, about Lebanon's prime minister visiting Clayat Airport, that's their second airport, focusing on reopening it to maybe boost the economy. So efforts towards normalization, expansion.
Okay, positive signs there, perhaps.
Yeah.
But then there's the main airport, Rafik Hariri International.
Yeah, a different source describes this unusual surge in activity there, way back around the time of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah's funeral in February 2023. It just shows how major political events can really complicate things for civilian airports.
And much more recently, there were some very serious allegations tied to that main airport.
Yes, according to the sources, specifically referencing a report in a British newspaper, there were these significant allegations that Hezbollah is smuggling and storing weapons through Beirut International Airport.
Those are incredibly serious claims.
Extremely serious. And in response, the sources say Lebanon's transport minister actually led a media tour of the airport. This was June 2025, specifically to counter those claims, to show the airport is secure and operating normally as a civilian facility.
And it's really crucial we emphasize here, we're just relaying what the sources state. These are allegations reported in the press, and this is the Lebanese government's reported response. We're saying strictly impartial, just presenting the information given to us.
Absolutely critical. And adding to the tension, the sources also describe actual military incidents happening near Beirut airport.
Yeah, this is where it gets really concerning for anyone traveling.
Definitely. There are reports of Israeli airstrikes hitting areas close to the airport. Sources mentioned damage, and incredibly, there was apparently footage showing a passenger plane taxiing nearby during one of these strikes.
Just imagine seeing that from the terminal, or worse, from the plane.
It's a chilling image, a stark reminder of how civilian flights can be right in the middle of active conflict. The sources also noted mentions of Israeli F-35 and F-15s flying over Beirut during that Nasrallah funeral period, too.
Again, just reporting what the sources described, these incidents, they just vividly show the immense risks when civilian aviation has to operate near or even within conflict zones. It's not abstract. It's jets overhead and strikes near runways.
Yeah, it really forces you to confront the challenges of international travel safety, airport security under that kind of pressure, and just the difficulty of maintaining normal air travel when regional tensions are that high.
Okay, let's shift back stateside now. The sources also flagged some notable safety incidents in the U.S.
Right. One was an air traffic control outage at Newark Liberty International Airport. Not for long, but the sources describe a critical blackout loss of both radar and radio comms for about 90 seconds.
90 seconds doesn't sound long, but losing radar and radio simultaneously in airspace as busy as Newark, that sounds incredibly dangerous.
It is. You lose situational awareness completely for that time.
Right.
It introduces a huge risk of aircraft getting too close, potential for collision, very alarming for controllers and pilots.
And there was another major safety concern highlighted, this one involving helicopters near Washington, D.C.
Yes, urgent safety recommendations came out from the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, about helicopter operations, specifically near Reagan National Airport, DCA.
Urgent recommendations. What triggered that?
Well, according to the sources, it was partly in response to a fatal crash back in January involving an American Airlines jet and a Black Hawk helicopter. One source mentioned a figure of 67 fatalities, which sounds devastatingly high, possibly referring to potential worst-case scenarios or maybe cumulative data related to such risks.
That's horrific.
But it wasn't just that one tragic event. The NTSB investigation uncovered this, frankly, shocking frequency of what they call close proximity events near DCA.
Close proximity. So, near misses.
Essentially, yes. The review found, get this, 15,214 near-miss incidents between commercial planes and helicopters in the airspace around Reagan Airport.
Wait, 15,000?
15,214 between October 2021 and December 2024.
In just over 3 years, near one airport. That number is staggering. Why is DCA so prone to this?
The sources don't dive super deep into the specific reasons for DCA, but you can piece it together. DCA's airspace is incredibly complex, right? It's heavily restricted because it's so close to DC security sites.
Yeah.
You've got a huge mix of commercial flights, general aviation, and importantly, a lot of helicopter traffic, government, military, medical, news, private. The rules are already complicated there. The NTSB basically said they are deeply concerned about the substantial risk of a mid-air collision and are pushing hard for a systemic long-term fix.
Wow. So these examples, geopolitical pressures on Beirut's airport, the system failure in Newark, and this alarming near-miss rate near DCA, they really underscore how complex aviation safety is. It's everything from global conflict down to managing incredibly crowded skies over major cities.
It's a constant challenge, requires nonstop vigilance from everyone involved, ATC, regulators, pilots, everyone.
And speaking of things in the sky, right above us, the sources also led us down a path towards some more, well, unconventional sightings, specifically reports about helicopters and some unexplained stuff.
Yes, this was interesting. Various reports you shared mentioned people noticing frequent helicopter activity over places like the Bronx and New York City, and also other parts of NYC, Westchester included. People are looking up and asking, what's going on?
Yeah, it's natural to wonder if you suddenly hear helicopters all the time. What are the sort of standard explanations mentioned?
Well, the sources point to things like police activity, That's a common known reason for helicopters to be operating low over residential areas, surveillance, transport, searches, that kind of stuff.
Okay, makes sense. But then mixed in with that, the sources included some more mysterious reports.
They did, yeah. Specifically linked to some of these Bronx helicopter sightings, the sources included reports of possible UFOs.
UFOs.
Yeah, the descriptions varied quite a bit. Some mentioned blinking lights, others a mysterious orb. There was even one report claiming something seen as a UFO then transformed into a helicopter.
Hmm. I remember one source had that image looked like a military jet escorting something really strange, but it came with a disclaimer, right, that it was labeled digitally created.
Correct. That's super important context for
Yeah.
visual reports like that. And separate from the UFO link, some sources just had people noting they were seeing military helicopters flying over their neighborhoods, just observing their presence.
So you get this real mix, don't you? You have known reasons, military maybe, for helicopters being there. And then alongside that, you have these intriguing, unverified, sometimes pretty wild interpretations and sightings, including classic UFO descriptions.
It really taps into public fascination, doesn't it? The sky is this big open space above us all. When people see something unusual, especially if it seems connected to the military or government, it naturally sparks curiosity and speculation. It says something about how we perceive things overhead. We look for the known, but maybe we're also wired to wonder about the unknown.
This deep dive has really covered a lot of ground, hasn't it? Or maybe a lot of sky.
Definitely. We started with the big picture, commercial aviation's recovery, Airbus pushing hard on sustainability with things like hydrogen. Then we shifted to those major military changes, Boeing ending the Super Hornet production to focus on future tech, unmanned systems, and that significant J-35 stealth fighter sale from China to Pakistan.
And we saw how aviation gets tangled right up in global events and safety issues. The really tense situation around Beirut's airport, critical system failures like that Newark ATC outage, and the just shocking number of near misses near Reagan Airport that prompted those urgent NTSB calls.
All the way down to the very local level, people noticing more helicopters, and these fascinating, sometimes puzzling reports of unexplained lights and objects, even possible UFOs, right over our own communities.
Taken together, these sources, they paint this picture of the aerospace world as incredibly dynamic, constantly evolving. It's driven by huge technological ambition, speed, efficiency, sustainability, but it's also constantly being shaped, sometimes violently, by conflict, by security needs, by the sheer density of air traffic, and yeah, even by the enduring mystery of just looking up and seeing something you can't quite explain.
It's where that cutting-edge technology smashes right into the messy reality of the world below and also bumps up against the vastness of the unknown above. It's quite a mix.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, here's maybe a final thought for you to chew on, building on all this. How do these interconnected stories from these huge multi-billion-dollar decisions about hydrogen fuel and stealth fighter exports that will shape global power for decades, to the immediate, tangible risks we saw in Beirut or near DCA, and even those mysterious lights in the sky, how does all that change how you think about the skies you fly through, or maybe just the sky you see when you step outside? And what do you think is the next major shift, the next big surprise that aerospace has in store for us?
That's a great question to ponder, because it really feels like the future of aerospace in all its complexity is arriving faster and faster these days.
It certainly does. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another stack of sources to explore.